back. The father of 10-year-old Jacqueline Cazares, one of the victims of the deadly rampage at a Texas elementary school, says his daughter would do anything for anyone. 21 people died, 19 of them children, in what is now being referred to as the deadliest school shooting since December 2012, when a gunman killed 26 people, including 20 children, at Sandy Hook Elementary School in Newtown, Connecticut. Uvalde, deep in the Texas Hill Country region, about 18 miles west of San Antonio, has about 16,000 residents, nearly 80% of them Hispanic or Latino. That's according to U.S. Census data. Like Newtown, it is a close-knit community of strong family connections and friendships.
She'd be the one to help her friend Denise there and then. When we were at the hospital, it was about 2.5 hours.
Meanwhile, hundreds of people gathered in Uvalde last night just to remember the victims of the deadly shooting at Robb Elementary School. Many who attended appeared dazed by what had just unfolded in their community, the murder of 19 children and 2 adults by an 18-year-old gunman armed with an AR-15 style rifle.
And all the families of this community.
While contrasting the mood in the country, an event billed as the largest gathering of Second Amendment attorneys in the country is scheduled to take place in the city of Houston, Texas, tomorrow, Friday, 4 days after authorities said the gunman killed at least 19 children and 2 teachers at the elementary school in Texas. Crews have unpacked boxes at the George R. Brown Convention Center and signs on windows welcoming visitors to 14 acres of guns and gear. As of Wednesday afternoon, the NRA had not announced any changes to its annual meeting, which is scheduled to feature former President Donald Trump, Texas Governor Greg Abbott, and U.S. Senator Ted Cruz as speakers. Organizers of the seminar did not respond to questions about whether Tuesday's school shooting had affected plans for the event. Well, joining us now for more on that, the gun laws, gun control, and that shooting is Dr. Courtney Bennett Arroyo, whose expertise is trauma at Loyola University, Maryland, from where she joins us. Dr. Bennett Arroyo, thank you for joining us on the program.
Thank you for inviting me.
Many Americans are shocked by the shooting in Texas, and as the shock wears off, they are angry. What should be the approach to helping them get through this trauma?
Yeah, and so the impact of the mass shooting at Robb Elementary School is likely going to vary depending on the individual, their proximity to this horrific event, whether they've experienced a previous trauma, right, the extent to which they identify with what's happened. And just as you've mentioned, people might initially experience shock that's going to change to anger, helplessness, numbness. So a trauma-informed approach that really engages individuals, the families, and the community more broadly is going to be really important. And there are those of us who may have witnessed this event and are witnessing the impact of this event through news outlets, right, or social media. And that might create for some people what's called a secondary or vicarious trauma. And not to mention that this event has happened 11 days after a mass shooting in Buffalo, and that there have been 213 mass shootings in the United States just in 2022 alone, right? And so there's going to be a layered impact for a lot of people. And just some things people can do to manage that might be kind of taking a break from social media, connecting with a loved one that they feel can support them, maintaining their routine to stay grounded, and also just considering some mental health resources in their area.
And Doctor, we've heard from a father of a 10-year-old who has said that his daughter was one that would do anything for anyone. The parents who have lost children in this attack, how should they grieve this period?
It's devastating, right? And there isn't necessarily one right way to grieve, but even just that there can be a patient or non-judgmental source of support available for the parents, and thinking about that this is a process, right? There isn't necessarily a linear path to grieving, especially the loss of a child. And so just knowing that there's a resource for support, people who are willing to make space for them to talk, willing to make space to be present in their pain, and that there's access to community-based and mental health resources that they could engage in when they feel ready to take that step.
I also know some authorities are doing their best to provide some comfort, which is usual, but what sorts of actions are usually taken during this time for those affected?
Often there's going to be some kind of a community level response, and that's going to be really critical to helping the community heal and start to build resilience, honoring collective healing in the Uvalde community. What are the ways that they connect with each other and support each other, listening to the voices of the students, teachers, and families of Robb Elementary School as a part of that healing process, but making sure there's trained mental health providers and peer support available that can encourage a trauma-informed response in all of the spaces that survivors might come in contact with, right? So that doctors have a trauma-informed response all the way to teachers, right, who are so important as well. And so just keeping in mind, it's an ongoing journey. People will start to build their own individual skills over time when they're ready to do that. But overall, just making sure that the community is supported and can support each other.
And the children killed in the attack have classmates, friends, best friends, you know, who have to mourn them and remember them probably all their lives. Do children ever outgrow trauma?
Yeah, right. And I think similarly, as I mentioned before, you know, every child's going to have their own way of responding to this attack, this loss. And their healing over time is going to be impacted by a number of factors, a lot of that in terms of the support that they have from their families, their friends, and their communities. And keeping in mind that there's an age range developmentally for the children at Robb Elementary School and how children respond to trauma based on their age. So there might be those changes in just their daily routine. And if they're not talking about what's happened, they might become more moody, their sleep might change. But to just create space to ask questions and to talk about what's happened. Can children heal from trauma? Absolutely. And I think the families, the communities, and the mental health resources that they have access to over time is going to support that process to honor their voice, acknowledge that they have a voice, and again, creating space for them to talk about it, that it's okay to acknowledge what's happened, to have adults in their life who are modeling some sort of healing process, who are modeling that it's okay to reach out for support and to acknowledge what you're feeling in response to what's happening. And so also trauma-informed approaches in the schools is going to be really important for children, the survivors who are trying to heal from what's happened.
And Doctor, I know you're in the field, the medical field, but I want to get your take on the gun laws in the United States, which is where you live. With all of this happening, I mean, it's an outcry around the world with regards to the recurrence of this nature.
Yeah, and you know, I'm not a policy expert, but what I can say when you think about risk assessment and risk management, even in the mental health field, is in addition to considering what are the individual factors that an individual who may be at risk of harming themselves or others might have, you got to think about the access to means and how accessible are means to act out thoughts. Even of harming an individual. And so that's something that I think is really critical to be thinking about in terms of policymaking and access to firearms in this country. Because again, when you look at that risk management picture, the risk assessment picture, ultimately you're thinking about managing the access to means to act upon a thought or a feeling that is connected to harming self or others.
Thanks again, Dr. Bennett, Courtney Bennett Ario. Thank you so much for joining us on the program.
Thanks for having me.